The air inside the arena that night was heavy, not just with competition, but with tension. Everyone could feel it. The Indiana Fever were up against Seattle, and while both teams had plenty to prove, the real story wasn't just about the matchup. It was about what was boiling underneath. Weeks of mounting frustration over officiating physical play, and a league leadership that seemed more concerned with optics than player safety. If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. Sophie Cunningham walked into that game knowing what was at stake. She's always been a player who thrives in chaos, but lately, the chaos had been coming from a place that had nothing to do with basketball strategy. The whistle, or lack of it, was becoming the deciding factor in too many games. And then it happened. Midway through the second quarter, Sophie made a hard cut toward the basket. Before she could even gather the ball, a Seattle defender caught her midsection and sent her sprawling to the floor. The sound of her hitting the hardwood echoed, a thud you could feel in your bones. The crowd gasped, waiting for the whistle. But there was nothing. No foul, no review, just a reset, as if nothing had happened. You could see it in her eyes when she got up. This wasn't just another missed call. This was another brick in the wall of frustration that's been building for weeks, not just for her, but for players across the league. Sophie isn't the type to sugarcoat things, and later, she'd make it clear exactly what that moment represented. A league that talks about protecting its stars, but too often leaves them exposed. Caitlin Clark, standing on the other end of the floor, had her own breaking point. She's been the center of physical targeting all season, and she didn't bother hiding her frustration. She barked at the refs after another no call, her voice carrying across the court. The message was obvious. Enough was enough. And they weren't alone. Becky Hammond, watching from the sidelines, had already been fuming over the way the game was being managed. The endless delays, the inconsistency, the confusion. At one point, she openly criticized the stoppages and the way the officials were losing control of the game. Kelsey Plum, who's known for her competitive edge, had been vocal earlier in the week about her own frustrations. She played an entire game while being hacked on drives and undercut on jumpers, only to walk away with 6 free throws. 6, for a player who spent half her night in the paint taking contact. It was an insult. It was becoming a chorus. The league's most marketable, most talented players all calling attention to the same problem. The officiating wasn't just bad, it was dangerous. For Sophie, the most insulting part wasn't even the physical play itself. She's built her career on toughness, on being able to absorb contact and keep going. No, the insult came later, when she got fined $500 for making a lighthearted joke about referees on TikTok. Let that sink in. The league had nothing to say about her being slammed to the floor in a nationally televised game. No review, no statement, no fine for the player who hit her, but a harmless, tongue-in-cheek social media clip that was worth a financial penalty. It was a kind of decision that makes you wonder where the WNBA's priorities really are. And then Commissioner Kathy Engelbert decided to pour gasoline on the fire. When asked about the complaints, she brushed them off, saying only losing teams complain about officiating. The problem? Sophie's team had just won. So had Caitlin Clark's team in several games where she had still been openly frustrated. It was a dismissive, out-of-touch response that made it clear the league wasn't listening or didn't want to. That's when Sophie decided she wasn't going to keep the conversation in the locker room. She told it straight. The officiating wasn't just inconsistent. It was eroding the integrity of the game. Dangerous plays were going unpunished, while harmless comments or expressions of frustration were being policed. The result? Players were starting to feel like they had to choose between speaking up and keeping their paychecks. And yet, in the middle of all of this, Sophie did what she always does. She competed. She hit every three-pointer her team made that night, finishing with 17 points and keeping Indiana in the game when momentum started to slip. She played through frustration and turned it into fuel. She wasn't alone, either. Aaliyah Boston stepped up in a massive way, grabbing 12 rebounds to go with 16 points, dominating the paint on both ends. Her performance was the backbone of the Fever's win, proving that even in chaos, their core could rise to the occasion. But this isn't just about one game. The officiating issues are part of a bigger, more dangerous problem. The WNBA has been riding a wave of growth thanks to stars like Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Plum, and yes, Sophie Cunningham. Attendance is up. Ratings are up. Merchandise is flying off the shelves. The league finally has momentum, real, measurable momentum. But momentum is fragile. And if the league keeps letting its biggest names take hits without consequence, that momentum will vanish. Fans aren't going to stick around to watch their favorites get battered without protection. And players aren't going to keep quiet if they feel unsafe. The irony is that the WNBA loves to market these players as faces of the league, using their highlights, their personalities, and their rivalries to sell tickets. But if you're going to market them, you have to protect them. You can't promote Caitlin Clark as the new face of women's basketball while allowing her to be a nightly target. You can't put Sophie's fiery persona in commercials and then fine her for using that same personality to call out problems. The issue isn't that the game is physical. Players like Sophie and Caitlin are fine with physicality. The issue is the double standard in what gets called and the lack of accountability when officials miss dangerous plays. Physical basketball can be part of the sport. Dangerous basketball, ignored by the whistle, can't be. What makes Sophie's frustration resonate is that it's not just about her. She's speaking for a lot of players who feel the same way but aren't as vocal. Younger players might not want to risk fines or the wrath of the league office. Veterans might feel it's pointless to keep bringing it up. Sophie, though, has never been the type to bite her tongue when something's wrong. And that's why her comments have weight. The most telling part of the night wasn't even the win or the stat lines. It was the fact that Sophie, after everything, still walked out with 800,000 new followers across her platforms. People aren't just watching her play. They're listening to what she says. And that's dangerous for a league trying to control the narrative. Because here's the truth. When players like Sophie and Caitlin speak out, it exposes more than just officiating flaws. It exposes a culture in the league office that prioritizes image over substance. That's the kind of thing that, if ignored long enough, turns into lawsuits, labor disputes, and PR disasters. The WNBA has two choices right now. They can take this moment seriously, address the officiating inconsistencies, and make players' safety the non-negotiable priority it should be, or they can keep dismissing complaints, handing out fines or comments while letting the dangerous plays pile up. One choice protects the league's future. The other risks burning the bridge between the players and the fans who are finally showing up in record numbers. Sophie Cunningham has made her choice. She's not going to stop speaking up. She's not going to downplay what happened just to make the league look better. And if her words make the WNBA uncomfortable, maybe that's exactly the point. Because this isn't just about one bad game or one missed call. It's about whether the league is willing to protect the very players who are keeping it alive. And if they're not, players like Sophie and the fans who back them will make sure everyone knows it. What happened in Seattle wasn't an isolated flare-up. It was the boiling point of something Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, and a handful of other veterans have been warning about for months. If you've been following the WNBA this season, you can practically draw the pattern in Sharpie. Big game. Physical play ramps up. Star players take hits that make the highlight reel for all the wrong reasons. Fans expect whistles. They don't come. And instead of the league addressing the officiating or player safety, the post-game news cycle gets hijacked by fines, press statements, and a league office pretending this is all part of the passion of the sport. Sophie has lived the cycle enough times to see exactly where it leads. Straight to resentment, distrust, and eventually a breaking point. It's worth remembering that Sophie isn't anti-physical play. If anything, she thrives in it. She's the type who will throw herself in front of a driving forward, take the charge, pop back up, and smirk like it was nothing. She came into the league knowing the WNBA is a tough, grown woman game. But there's a difference between toughness and recklessness, between earning your points through hard defense and just knocking someone into the floor because you know the refs aren't going to stop you. That's the line the WNBA's officiating has been letting blur. And when you blur that line long enough, you get exactly what happened in Seattle. A dangerous play shrugged off, frustration boiling over, and the league's top talent forced to carry the narrative instead of just playing basketball. The irony? Sophie didn't just survive the hit. She took the frustration and turned it into one of her best performances of the season. From that moment on, she was locked in, not just playing to win, but playing to make a point. Every shot she took had purpose. Every defensive rotation was sharp. By the final buzzer, she'd nailed all of her team's three-pointers, racked up 17 points, and been the emotional engine that pushed them to victory. It was classic Cunningham. Take a hit, then hit back harder in the only way that really counts, the scoreboard. And yet, she knew exactly how the headlines would read the next day. Not Sophie Cunningham leads Fever to win. Not Boston dominates in the paint. But something about officiating controversies, Caitlin Clark's frustration, and the league's carefully worded responses. That's the part that wears on players. They're putting in the work, grinding through the schedule, staying in top condition, and the storylines keep being about things that shouldn't even be part of the game. For Caitlin, the weight is doubled. Every time she steps on the court, she's carrying the league's current marketing push. Every network broadcast, every promotional campaign, every attendance spike is tied to her name. And instead of protecting that investment, which is just common sense in any other pro league, the WNBA has allowed her to be the nightly target for cheap shots and message fouls from opponents looking to make a statement. That's where Sophie's voice cuts through the noise. She's not Caitlin, the rookie phenom whose rise is under the microscope of the entire sports world. She's not a player the league can easily dismiss as overreacting because she's new. She's a veteran with a reputation for toughness, someone who has played through pain, taken her lumps, and still shown up for her team. So when Sophie says the officiating is inconsistent, when she says the league is getting this wrong, it's harder for them to write her off. And Sophie has been clear, this isn't about whining over a loss. Her team won that night. This is about protecting the integrity of the game and making sure the product fans are falling in love with isn't destroyed from the inside out. The league's current approach is a public relations time bomb. On one hand, they're enjoying unprecedented growth, record-breaking ticket sales, more national coverage, and a new wave of casual fans tuning in. On the other, they're alienating their core talent by ignoring legitimate safety concerns. You don't have to be a marketing expert to see the danger here. If players feel unprotected, they'll speak out. If they keep getting fined for speaking out, they'll get angrier. And if nothing changes, that anger will eventually boil over into boycotts, public feuds, or worse, players walking away. The NBA learned decades ago that you can't let your top talent be treated like punching bags. That's why stars like LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Giannis Antetokounmpo get a certain level of protection from officials. Not favoritism, but recognition that the game benefits when the best players are able to actually play. The WNBA is still acting like it hasn't gotten that memo. Sophie's refusal to stay quiet has earned her a flood of new supporters. Her follower count skyrocketing by 800,000 wasn't just a fluke. It was proof that fans want players who speak with honesty and fire. People aren't rallying behind her just because she hits big shots. They're rallying because she's willing to say the things they've been yelling at their TVs for weeks. That connection is gold for a league trying to grow its audience. And yet, the WNBA keeps acting like players speaking their mind is a threat to control rather than a lifeline to fan engagement. The conversation after Seattle also cracked open a deeper issue, the perception that the league office is disconnected from the reality on the floor. Kathy Engelbert's comment about losing teams complaining about officiating might have been meant as a deflection, but backfired. Players immediately pointed out the flaw. Many of the complaints were coming after wins, which means this isn't sour grapes. This is frustration that exists regardless of the final score. That's a dangerous reality for any league. When even victories leave players angry, it's a sign the system itself is broken. Inside the locker room, Sophie isn't just venting. She's trying to keep the focus on solutions, better training for officials, more transparency about missed calls, clearer protocols for reviewing dangerous plays, and above all, a culture where speaking up about safety doesn't get you punished more than the act that put you at risk in the first place. She knows change won't come overnight, but she also knows that silence guarantees nothing will change at all. In many ways, this moment is a crossroads for the WNBA. They can choose to embrace the criticism, treat it as a wake-up call, and make changes that will strengthen the league long-term. or they can keep circling the wagons, protecting the image while the reality erodes beneath it. The problem is, image can only hold for so long before reality breaks through. And when it does, the damage isn't just to the league's reputation. It's to the trust between players, officials, and the people running the show. Sophie's making sure that if the league chooses a wrong path, no one can say they weren't warned. And here's the thing about Cunningham. She's not afraid of being the loudest voice in the room if it means protecting her teammates. Whether it's Caitlin Clark taking an unnecessary hit or Kelsey Plum getting mauled on drives with nothing to show for it, Sophie's going to call it out. Because in her mind, the league can't ask players to sell the game to fans while ignoring the reality those same fans can see with their own eyes. That's the paradox the WNBA hasn't figured out yet. You can't market authenticity and then punish it. You can't celebrate passion and then fine it. You can't push star power and then let those stars get tossed around without consequence. Seattle was just the latest chapter in a story that's been building all season. But if the WNBA doesn't take the message seriously this time, there's a good chance the ending won't be the one they're hoping for. Because Sophie Cunningham isn't going to stop talking. Caitlin Clark isn't going to stop demanding answers. And the fans, now more invested than ever, aren't going to stop paying attention. And once you've got the players and the fans on the same side of an issue, there's really only one question left. How long can the league afford to be on the other? What makes Sophie Cunningham stand so impossible to ignore is that she's speaking from a position of both credibility and visibility. This isn't a rookie overstepping. This isn't a bench player lashing out in frustration. This is someone who's been in the trenches, taken hits, dealt with the grind, and still found a way to not just survive, but lead. When Sophie talks about officiating, it's coming from lived experience, not from a highlight clip or an emotional reaction in the moment. And the irony is, Sophie isn't just protecting herself when she talks like this. She's protecting the whole league, even the players who might roll their eyes at her fire. Because the truth is, if the WNBA continues to ignore these concerns, the damage won't just hit a handful of stars. It'll ripple down to everyone. When officiating fails, the game itself changes. Players start holding back to avoid injury. Teams adjust strategies to account for what the refs won't call. And eventually, fans notice the product on the floor feels different. Not as clean, not as competitive, not as inspiring. That's when viewership drops, attendance slows, and the hype train grinds to a crawl. Sophie's been around long enough to know that the WNBA's current momentum is rare. You don't get this kind of buzz every season. You don't get a Caitlin Clark and Aya Wilson, a Breanna Stewart, all operating their primes, alongside rising personalities like herself, every year. This is a once-in-a-generation cocktail of talent, personality, and fan engagement. But buzz without protection is a short-term sugar high. It's great for headlines, but it won't sustain a league. And Sophie can see the cliff ahead if leadership doesn't act. That's why she hasn't backed down, even after the fine for her TikTok jab at the refs. For her, it's about principle. If a player can be financially penalized for a lighthearted social media joke, but the league won't so much as issue a warning after a dangerous play on the court, what message does that send? It tells players that image control is more important than safety, and that is a dangerous precedent to set. The locker room in Indiana after the Seattle game was a mix of adrenaline and disbelief. They had won. They had played to the chaos, but no one was in a celebratory mood. Aaliyah Boston, who had been a rock all game with her 16 points and 12 rebounds, shook her head when talking about the officiating. Caitlin Clark, still fuming, was short with her post-game answers. And Sophie? She was already thinking about how to address it publicly without giving the league an excuse to hit her with another fine. She knows how to toe that line, be clear enough to make the point, but measured enough to keep it on basketball terms. Still, she's not afraid to take heat, because she understands something a lot of players shy away from. Sometimes you have to risk being the problem to force a solution. The interesting twist here is that Sophie's rise in popularity isn't just about her game or her personality. It's about trust. Fans trust it when she speaks. It's the unfiltered truth. In a sports world that's increasingly sanitized, that kind of honesty is rare. That trust is also why her voice carries so much weight in this conversation. It's one thing for fans to complain about officiating, Leagues can ignore that. It's another for one of your most recognizable players to put on record. That's when the conversation shifts from background noise to front-page news. And make no mistake, the WNBA can't afford too many more front pages about officiating scandals. Not when they're trying to convince networks, sponsors, and casual viewers that their product is the future of sports entertainment. In the coming weeks, Sophie knows the league might try to wait this out. That's the classic play. Let the story burn hot for a few days, then hope another game, another headline, steals the spotlight. But that's not going to work here, not when the frustration is this widespread and the stakes are this high. Because here's the reality. If they don't fix this, the next incident won't just spark angry tweets or post-game comments. It could cause an injury that derails a season. It could sideline one of their stars during a playoff run. And once that happens, the conversation will shift from why didn't they listen to how could they let this happen? Sophie's trying to make sure it doesn't get to that point. And the fans who've been rallying behind her, the ones flooding her follower count and sharing her words, they're not going to let the league ignore it either. If the WNBA wants to keep its momentum, it's going to have to make a choice soon. Protect its players or protect its silence. Sophie Cunningham has already made hers.